Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. So, two fairly significant stories we want to talk about today, pieces of information. One is, at this point, we believe here at MFAN that Bakhmut has fallen, that the Ukrainian forces that remain in the far western sectors of Bakhmut are very close to capitulation. And for the most part, for all intents and purposes, Russian forces now control or have firm control over Bakhmut. Now, we've also seen over the course of the last 24 hours significant airstrikes and cruise missile strikes by Russian forces against targets throughout Ukraine. We know that a couple of dozen cruise missiles, along with drones, hit targets throughout Ukraine, including near the capital of Kiev as well. Now, one specific strike is drawing a lot of media attention, and that is the strike that took place near or in the town of Oman, located here. So the question is why would the Russians strike this town? What would be the military objective for Russian cruise missiles to hit targets in Oman? Well, you have an air base to the north of the city, but you also have another very crucial piece of what I would call a target in Oman that the Russians were looking to strike. And I'm going to go over to the other map to show you, the viewer, just exactly what in all probability the Russians were going after. Or there is a possibility that one of these cruise missiles were engaged by this specific unit that is headquartered in Oman. But we don't know all the facts at this point. We do know that a high-rise was hit by what looks to be a cruise missile or some sort of missile, and a great deal of damage was done to that high-rise. So let's go again over to the other map, and let's have a look at what is in the town of Oman that the Russians could be going after. Well, there you have it. Headquartered in Oman is the 210th Anti-Aircraft Missile Regiment. Now, it's possible that the Russians could have detected the deployment of Patriot missile batteries towards Oman. We know that given the area that Oman's in, it's at a major crossroads in which the deployment of Western weapon systems could be heading to this town. And there's a highly likelihood that the Russians were trying to target some sort of supply depot in this town. But again, there you have it. You have the town of Oman, and then in Oman you have the 210th Anti-Aircraft Missile Regiment. Now, that also leaves the possibility that anti-missile fire from this unit could have hit one of these Russian cruise missiles and then cause that cruise missile to then strike a civilian-type target in the city of Oman. But there is a Ukrainian military unit headquartered in Oman, and it's an anti-aircraft regiment that's used to bring down Russian cruise missiles. So again, there is Ukrainian military assets in Oman, and there's also an airfield north of that locale. And unfortunately, this is war, and this sort of thing is going to happen. Now we're going to head back over to the Bakhmut map to show you, the viewer, kind of what is happening or has been happening over the last few days. So we'll leave the area near Oman and head due east towards the battleground that is Bakhmut. So you can see the situation has changed greatly overnight. And I'll try to explain what exactly I'm talking about when I say greatly. Because, again, it's put the Ukrainians in a more precarious situation than they already were than the last 24, 48 hours. And the movements on this map could very well have occurred 24, 48 hours ago. We're just now seeing it on this map. So if we go back and we look the last 2 days, and you can see what has happened. Obviously, the Russians break through the main defensive line through the center of Bakhmut, near the railway station and the railway line that runs through the city. Obviously, prior to that, they crossed the river just to the east of the main administrative sector of the town. But as we watch, as Russian forces cross the main railway line into the western portions of Bakhmut, you see something rather interesting happen, and it's in these crossroads here. And we'll go 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, and now we're today. Now it's interesting, the Russians now control this main intersection that is near Uvalina Street. This locale gives the Russians the ability to target anything that would cross Uvalina Street. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. As they either retreat from the city or they try to further reposition their defensive lines. This gray area is areas where fighting is taking place. It's contested. The orange area, the red area, is where Russians control. In the area that's not gray is alleged Ukrainian control. But again, if you look at the position of Russian forces and then you look at Uvalina Street in terms of if this is the area that the Ukrainians as the final defensive redoubt, and it's not a very large area. You're looking at about a dozen older Soviet-style apartment buildings. If you look at the distance from the intersection that the Russians control to where the road starts to curve in a straight line, that's 1.6 kilometers. So the Russians have the ability to fire unobstructive down Uvalina Street against any Ukrainian target that tries to cross this main road through this part of town. And then obviously to the it would be to the north along this street. I'm not even going to try to butcher that, but again, if we mark the distance, whoops, let's get out of that real quick. From Russian control, another straight line down, again, is not very far as a bird flies. So again, you're looking at 738 meters. So you got Russians here, you have Russians here, and essentially any Ukrainian force that ends up at this intersection is not going to be happy campers. So very difficult situation as the Russians start to control these intersections on these last areas where the Ukrainians may or may not actually be. The Ukrainians could have surrendered. We just don't know that yet. But again, as you look at Bakhmut in total, obviously the administrative area firmly under Russian controls, the eastern suburbs firmly under Russian control, the northern part of town firmly under Russian control, the southern part of town firmly under Russian control, and the western part of town is contested. But roughly the Russians right now control about 90% of Bakhmut, to include the main civil sector, the railway, and bridges over the river that cross the eastern portions of Bakhmut. So to say that the city is still contested, in military terms, the city has been taken by Russian forces. So we just have to make that fairly clear. If this map, which tends to be Ukrainian sympathetic, is any idea of what's happening on the ground, and it may be conservative, and tilted towards the Ukrainians, then obviously the situation is very, very dire for any Ukrainian forces that still could be located in this area. Essentially, right now, there's one way out of town for the Ukrainians. The Russians have the ability to sever this road, or have severed this road, with these forces located here. There are Russian airborne forces operating to the north. You have PMC Wagner forces, and then you also have elements of the 106th Guards Airborne Division to the south as well. This road right here, again, cut off. Very hard for the Ukrainians to remove themselves from this area. So again, the only real route out for Ukrainian forces is along this road here. This and it's not a major road. It's just an offbeat road that the Ukrainians have access to. So not a good situation to be in for Ukrainian forces. And I imagine over the next couple of days, this will finally resolve itself, and we'll learn a bit more. I believe that in the months and maybe years ahead, we will see books written about the battles that took place in Bakhmut. Look, the Ukrainians fought a courageous fight. They were put in a predicament. They were put in a situation where it would be very difficult to achieve victory. But they held out a very long time, and those forces that did their duty should be honored as such. But that's where it sets for today. Again, we're following the situation. It's very fluid, and again, there have been Russian cruise missile attacks across Ukraine over the last 24 hours, including a significant strike on the town of Oman. Now, we continue to hear reports that the Ukrainians are building up for some sort of offensive push against Russian forces. Again, difficult to say what's going to happen in the days and weeks ahead. We'll continue to monitor, we'll continue to report, and we'll have more information very, very soon. Thank you for joining us today. More to come. Have a good day.